So AI is bad news across industry wide, and here's why. Even now, where AI is a lot sharper than it was 3 years ago when we just kind of like started playing with it, it is still incapable of writing a story like a journalist. And I think you know that, and I know that, and I think a lot of our friends in media know that.
Hi folks, James here, and welcome to the Spiral Circle. A lot of people know me as someone who's super interested in news and PR and media, and why wouldn't I be? I've been doing it for the better part of 10 years, I've seen all the cycles, and I've worked in all the different areas. But I wanted to speak to someone today who really understands the nitty gritty of tech PR in a country that's currently in war. Alona Stein is the co-CEO of ReBlonde, and ReBlonde is an Israel-based tech PR firm. So they represent companies and founders and clients who want to sell their story out into the world and into the international media. So you can imagine how many different directions our conversation went when we spoke about representing a company in wartime, representing an Israeli company and what that means, and the sensitivities behind finding and telling your stories. We also spoke about AI and the impact that's having on communication and relationships and in news generation. And we spoke about a bunch of different things, and the conversation could have gone in many different directions, but we kept it as streamlined as possible for the purpose of our viewers. And I really hope you enjoy. Alona, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited because we're both coming at this conversation today with insights and experience in news and journalism and PR and tech companies and all of these things. So it's super exciting. Before we get going and before we dive deep, I want to understand your story because you spent all this time telling other people's stories and getting their stories into the news. And I want to best understand you and Alona and ReBlonde. So why don't we take it from the top? You just give us a bit of a background into who you are, what you're doing, and how we got talking today. And then we'll dive straight into some other conversations.
Absolutely. Yes, we're so used to telling other people's story, we sometimes forget to tell ours. So it's a really good way to start. I'm Alona Stein. I'm co-CEO at ReBlonde PR agency. We've been around for 2 decades now, basically doing PR for tech companies all across the world, from all different backgrounds and sections. We go from huge brands like Spotify, and unicorns like Deal and Fireblocks, all the way down to the tiniest startups, sometimes with just two founders and an idea. And ultimately, the idea is to tell their story the best way possible to the world. Now, being a tech PR means we get to be in the forefront of news all the time, which is pretty exciting because everything cool is happening in tech before it happens anywhere else. And two, we run on a super wide spectrum of technologies that are trending throughout the years. If it's AI or defense, drones, crypto, VR, AR, consumer, fashion, retail, like everything was here. I've been in the company for the past 13 years. Grew my way from like a junior social media account manager all the way up to being a partner and co-CEO. And I think the only way to survive in an industry like this for 13 years is like knowing that, one day is not going to be looking like the other, and there's always something happening, and the stories are changing, and the challenges are changing. So in a way, kind of like feel as if it hasn't been that long. So I think that's a good thing to say about anyone's profession, right?
Definitely. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure you feel the same way about media because uh even at the end of the day, you do the same by like going to a story and trying to give different perspectives of it, and I do the same. But the end, like the materials are changing so drastically that it just keeps like keeping its pace and keeping its momentum.
Mm. Well, I think actually, I'm going to build on what you said there, actually, because I think it's really true what you say about the kind of everything, you do the same work, but it kind of changes all the time. And that's why I found, for those who are listening or watching this who may not be so familiar with the context, I spent 5 years in tech journalism, but then before that, I was actually in tech PR myself as well. So I kind of bounced around a lot, the different sides of the coin, so to speak. And one of the things I always found about tech specifically is that, you know, the news is such a fast-paced, crazy, constant environment that kind of is super toxic, especially when you're in it as well. And I find that tech is kind of free from that. Now, there's toxicity in every area of news and media, but I think, I hope anyway, reporting on tech and the kind of the companies and the technologies that are being developed and grown and products and services, there's a bit of separation between the nastiness that can come with, let's say, political news, or the kind of doom scrolling that you see anywhere else. What attracted you to tech and tech storytelling and narratives and all of that? Where did you see where did your appeal come from?
Well, actually, it was pretty incidental. I did work in the spokespeople office at the IDF, but from the intelligence unit. So I kind of like started getting my work and my concept of what it means back then. Only very different. Also 20 years ago. And then I went to university, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I did my BSc actually in biology and psychology, thinking I'm going to become either a doctor or a psychologist. And then before you enter the second phase of your school, when you want to do MA in psychology, like you have to take some kind of a test that decides, based on your grade, where you're going. So I took a year to kind of like think about what I want to do. And during that year, I ended up just finding a job, to like not just sit at home and wait for a year until I make a decision. So I got here. They were looking back then for people who were interested in marketing and tech and social media back then without previous experience. I got here, a little bit of like interviews and some tasks, and I made it in. And my interest in tech actually grew from this place. Like I don't have a tech background. I worked for a startup for a little bit, but not even in a tech position, more operational. And I learned everything I know about tech here. And this industry like really keeps you on your toes. You have to be ahead of the news all the time. You have to start your morning with reading. You have to know what's going on. You have to get those push notifications. So I think that for a person like me to be always like on top of it and knowing what's going on and understanding where things are headed is probably what tracks me here and what keeps me here all this time.
Yeah, it's kind of like the personality first, and then you
Yeah,
find the profession that fits that personality.
exactly.
I would definitely agree with that. Now, it's hard enough to work in PR and work with clients or founders, whoever, whether you're doing kind of big picture or more focused. It's hard enough to frame stories and get the messaging out there anyway, right? But you
Yeah,
do it with companies in a war zone, and you represent Israeli companies, but also, as I understand it, non-Israeli companies. But let's
yeah.
focus on Israel for now. The Israeli companies during war times, coming off of a pandemic. I mean, where do you even start in getting a company to get to refine their messaging and speak out? Because a lot of companies want to speak out on things and get their voices out there all the time and newsjack the stories that are out there. Is that always a good idea? How do you navigate these kinds of things?
It's an excellent question. And I think the answer, again, speaking about Israeli companies and Israeli founders for a second, because it's a bit different for non-Israelis, but coming from an Israeli founder perspective, this is a very interesting question that has different answer whether we are during wartime or not. Because I would say that in your profession, in your sector, whatever it may be, fintech, crypto, AI, cyber, you name it, um, finding a way to connect to the news somehow is the best thing you can do for your brand, especially when you're a small company, because your own news, the things that you're going to be pushing out, are not going to be provocative, interesting enough to make it a tier one section all the time. maybe with big funding, maybe with huge partnership. But at the end of the day, if you're looking to build a normal or a good PR and brand recognition out there, the way to tie into what's happening in the news agenda and newsjacking, just like you said, it's probably the best way to gain more tier one coverage than with potential stories for small startups. So in non-wartime, yes, whenever possible, do it right. There are ways to do it properly. But try to build your PR strategy around that, because that's going to be just wins that potentially other stories cannot get you.
Mm.
During wartime, I think this is like one of the most interesting things and the largest dilemmas founders and even us as their consultants are facing, because there's an axis there, right, of between showing resilience versus chasing ambulances. Let's call it like even, the ambulance axis. There is those who are like, if there's something happening, those who are running in to help and to try, and those who are just like taking pictures and like, spreading it out on social media. So in a way, your brand strategy is kind of like that on this axis. And I think you should really understand and decide whether or not what you do and what your company does truly and really contributes to the situation that we're in right now, whether it's a pandemic or a war, whether it's a war that Israel is, Israel is always not positioned well, but let's say the beginning,
Well, don't worry, we'll
before.
get into that.
Yeah, okay. But the idea is like really to understand whether or not newsjacking is something that is beneficial for you. Does it create value for the reader? Does it create value to you? Or you're just trying to like leech on something that has nothing to do with you. And in that case, just don't.
How do you, as an advisor or as the PR side of these things, navigate that, right? Because you must work with founders or marketing departments or whoever you work with it as in your client kind of portfolio. I remember it, the clients wanting to etching to be in the news and to jump into that cycle. And I also have been on the other side of that as the news side. Something will happen and my inbox gets flooded with so and so quotes. Here's what so and so thinks about the news story of yesterday or this morning. When do you guide them into when it's appropriate or not appropriate to
For
do
sure.
that? And is that a sensitivity that exists?
Absolutely. And I will tell you a little industry secret. The more mature the company is and the more there's a comms position with experience there, the less you have to like really like push back on founders. Because the bigger the company, there's a better idea of like corporate culture and what is right and what isn't. It's usually some kind of a leash you have to put on early stage companies,
Mm.
early stage founders. That's generally speaking. Specifically in this case, there's a lot of like countless of interesting examples of where things actually moved forward. Like just 2 weeks ago, we have a client in the homeland security space called Octopus. Their software really manages the command and control center in Petah Tikva, and Petah Tikva, is getting bombarded heavily this round, and I think in previous rounds as well. And we're actually brought in a BBC team to come and like actually see like how does command and control uses AI these days to try and understand, where is it gonna fall? Quick response, what we can do that we couldn't do before when we didn't have AI. Like that's a story that adds value. That's a story that gives someone something to the reporter, gives something to the audience, and it's interesting to see these days how AI can help. On the contrary, we had a client that I wouldn't give too much information because it's a bit sensitive, but ultimately their bottom line was like, I need people to know that if this and this would have happened, October 7th would have prevented. And we're like, no, because
Yeah. Oh,
no, not speaking theoretically, especially not about something that is, we can't even start talking about the sensitivities.
yeah.
It's not a good messaging. We're not heading to that direction. And, luckily it's someone that was collaborative. They understood. We switched the messaging to something else more, rationalized, for that matter,
Bit more diplomatic, maybe as well, probably.
diplomatic, but even like, you can give a good value without chasing ambulances, right? We just spoke about this. You can provide a good value. You can talk about the product without just like throwing names for the sake of throwing names, especially for so explosive matters. And it's just about positioning it right and doing it the right way.
So when it comes to messaging and
Mhm.
commenting on stories, and whether it's joining or fighting against these narratives that are being built in these extraordinary times, right? It's like tech companies have to balance news cycles anyway, let alone in the context of war or, and as you mentioned earlier, previously pandemics. Um, who is shaping some of these narratives? Is it other media outlets that you have to learn to navigate to get around? Is it governments? Is it think tanks or groups? Like, how are these narratives being built before they get penetrated or manipulated or enhanced?
I think this is a question that actually before October 2023, my answer would have probably been different. But as October 2023 happened, we also joined as a pro bono project called Words of Iron. I don't know if you're familiar with
Mhm.
that, but
Yeah.
basically the idea was to clean fake news regarding Israel about from X, from Twitter. And it was like a really, really cool group of a couple of like, super talented, smart startup nation guys who were able to build a very simple mechanism that basically, if you as a reader read something, you need to mark it as like false information, not a false information. And that way it would have like kind of like worked together with the X algorithm. And I think that only that deep dive, because, like you said, we're in tech, we do the good news, we're not in politics. Like, our world is very, very positive, very pink most of the time. But only like being a part of that project and like really understanding what is happening on X, and then understanding its effect on actual news, like, the news that we're seeing every day and that they're reading in traditional media. I understood that this is where the narrative starts. And it's driven from the people, it's driven from the masses. It's not like top down being brought to us like it used to be a couple of years ago. This is a whole conversation about people's, trust in news and where they're consuming news and whether or not news is still the first and most reliable source to people, yes or no. But at the end of the day, especially with things like that, pandemic, war, anti-Semitism, criticism about Israel, I believe everything that really just starts from the ground, and then it affects so high up to the point that you may not have thought, like, in advance they can affect it this way. So like VCs pulling back because the public sentiment is so bad, or clients pulling back because we even had an experience. We had a client, a German client that worked with us a couple of years, like in a couple of rounds. They were coming back together at the beginning of 2024 for another round. And then everything was already set. Even the kickoff date was scheduled. And then the guy said, listen, I'm so sorry, but our CFO was not aware that you're Israelis, and we have a policy that we can't work with Israelis. So we're going to have to like pull back now. And it's not even like, a new client. It's someone that we know for many years and we worked with in the past. So I do think that everything just starts from the ground and builds up. And I think it has its toxic effect on every good area in life. If it's tech, if it's education, if it's really like anything we can think of.
So, wow, that's give me a lot to think about. I actually think I agree with your assessment of the inversion of where news is coming from, because it used to be drip down,
Yeah.
and now it really is kind of top heavy. Top heavy, yeah, it's kind of top. You have like the masses that are framing these narratives, and we can see everything that comes from that, and we can see the complications of fake news and AI generated content and misinformation, etc. When we are living in a stage where trust in media is record lows, and we see that everywhere, not even in tech, not even in Israel, just kind of every facet of media you can imagine, trust is low. what does that do for the PR communications people in terms of where they chase media opportunities? So what I mean by that is the coveted TechCrunch headline or the New York Times write-up or the BBC video piece, are those still as sought after as they once were? Or is the new place for media and for those conversations more ground level? Whether that's on podcasts like this or on
Yeah.
X, on blog, like what's it looking in a PR point of view? Like where do you go as a response to where the world is going?
So this is a very, very interesting question with a lot of different like branches of where it can go, and I can probably just talk about this for a day and a half. But
Sorry,
let's
I didn't mean to
this.
ask such a broad,
It's
we'll try to keep it focused. Sorry.
I think it's really the most interesting topic that we are dealing with. I would say in the past couple of years. And it is how the landscape is changing and what it means, not just for the present work, but also for the future. Because for us being in PR, we are directly affected by media changes. And if, we used to have X amount of reporters working for TechCrunch full time or for the Wall Street Journal or for Washington Post or you name it, and the landscape is shrinking dramatically, then it means that you're heavily competing over every single slot, like a lot more than you used to before. And that's even before we're talking about pandemics and AI and wars and all of that. So already you're kind of like in a position where you have to really sharpen your skills and your stories and to make sure that you're getting what you want or directing clients to what is reasonable and what makes sense. Um, and and I will also talk about something else that is more like publicly available these days than it was before. So then we have this as a starting point. Now, add to that the fact that some publications are, they have their idea of what Israel is and what it shouldn't be. And could be that they have converted how they feel about Israeli companies and Israeli founders than they were before. And we understand the sentiment. We read all their stories. We know where things are headed. So we do have those conversations with our clients. And sometimes our clients understand, and sometimes they want us to try anyway. The only way that we will stop them is if we think it's going to turn back on them, like in a way that if we think that getting to this reporter would actually have a potentially more negative effect than a positive one, then let's just not do it and let's switch for something else. But otherwise, we're happy to try. Worst comes to worst, they're not going to cover.
But then there's a different conversation to be had about whether bad news is worse than no news, right? Like there's that like sensational paparazzi approach, which is, well, at least they're talking about me, or you have heard of me, kind of thing. Do you get
Yeah.
any of that, or is that just not a game worth playing?
Well, my partner, Moti Per, always says that, every PR is good PR as long as they
Right.
spell
That's
it.
yeah, exactly.
I think like the one star there is at war. That maybe it's not a good idea simply because, if you're not a defense company, you shouldn't be portrayed as a war-related company. If you are having sensitive contracts with partners in specific places in the world that right now being positioned as Israeli would have a negative effect on you and might actually, cost you your partners and your contract. So it does have a negative effect sometimes. And this is one of the dilemmas that founders are facing all the time. Like, do we move forward with the fact that we're Israeli based and Israeli formed? Do we just talk about that headquarter somewhere else? At the end of the day, it really depends on, the kind of personality they have as a founder, but also the kind of business that they run and the kind of clients they sell to. I mean, Wiz is a good example for a company that was born Israeli, went out to the world as Israeli, fights political internal disputes here. So there's no issues there. I don't think there's a single client of Wiz that doesn't know that they are Israelis and decided, to go with them regardless. But there are some companies that, started here, grew, are at the point where their headquarters are somewhere in the US, have clients in all kinds of places in the world, serve all kinds of different countries. And that potentially, being too much referred to as Israelis or too much supportive of what's happening here might come back and bite them. So maybe
Mm.
it's not a good idea for them.
I had that in my journalist days. I'd report on someone and they'd say, don't write that we're Israeli. We're a Delaware company. Well, okay, well, how
Mhm.
many companies are actually like native Delaware companies? No, you get like incorporated in Delaware. So like they say we're a Delaware company. Okay, fine. And even in nowadays, when I'm doing these interviews, I don't include it in the episode, but before each episode, I say, in the event of a siren, we'll do this, we'll do that, and there's a protocol that's taking place. And a second question I have for the guests is a bit of a strange one. It's, in the event that that does happen, do you want that included in the episode? Like, do you want that to be a moment that is shown, or do you want me just to cut it out completely? And that reaction never brings out like indifference, right? So
Mhm.
like someone's either like, keep it in, we're Israeli, this is what we're going through, I want people to see it, and they're really bullish on it.
Yeah.
And the other half, to your point, say, I don't want to show any potential customers that things are unsettled here. I'd rather just keep it calm and flow. And it's interesting because we, as kind of PR people and as journalists, are always told that it's all about the storytelling and it's all about the crafting of the narrative. But then we're also told, and I was told this in my PR days, but also I kind of agreed with it in my journalism days, is that, the data and the numbers, that's what does a lot of the talking, right?
Yeah.
When there's a report or a study or a funding number, when it comes to Israel itself and reporting on Israeli companies out of Israel in a war zone, what about that tell me about that tension between the emotions behind the storytelling, but also the kind of hard figures and facts and data that we also love. Well, where
Yeah.
does that play into your work?
I think that a lot of different day-to-day stuff and activities are being kind of like rewatched and organized during wartime. Like even non-related, super like annual or quarterly study that goes out, like a research paper that a company just does every year, and even the kind of like that reporters might expect. Um, we may not send it to local media here during this time just because like the media attention is not there. Like if the coverage is mostly around what is happening in the war and if your story can't really contribute to what is happening right now, then in such a small media landscape, and we spoke about how much it's shrinking, but here specifically in Israel it's always been small. Then there's no room for that. And it doesn't really matter if it comes from a place of us or the client or the media thinks it's unsensitive or it's just they don't have room for that. The bottom line, the result would be the same, and it would make sense for us to wait and push for that a little bit longer. It's not the case with international media. I mean, for international brands or Israeli brands, they have their ongoing, PR schedule and PR plan for them. They can, potentially move forward with all of the other stuff that we spoke about, whether or not they're pushing it as Israeli, whether or not they are saying something about what's happening right now. Most reporters are not going to ask if their coverage area is not relevant to it. I mean, most reporters know how to make the separation and the differences. And even us, I'm traveling a lot. I'm going to all these conferences. I always say where I'm from. And like the worst I got was a huh, but it was never just like something like more dramatic than that. And usually it's like, oh, cool. I really want to visit Tel Aviv at some point. I'm like, yeah, wait just a little bit and come to us when we're ready. Um,
That's often what I find about, by the way, the difference between online and offline is that people are so quick to be aggressive or rude or abusive online, but actually in the real world, people are either positive or they shut down and kind of don't say anything. At least in this context, obviously there is bad stuff that happens, but in the context you're
yeah.
talking about, it is kind of like, oh, okay. And then the conversation kind of very quickly ends.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they think in the back of their head, but at the end of the day, they don't know what I think. So as long as we're able to have a professional conversation, then it's fine. But at the end of the day, to answer your question, I do think that the strategy needs to be adjusted. Maybe not dramatically changed. It really depends on what you have coming up and time sensitiveness of all of it, and what's your target audience and where does the story need to go. But I have to tell you that for non-Israeli clients, business has been completely as usual. For Israeli clients, speaking to clients to reporters abroad, business has been usual. It's more like the whether or not things are coming out properly here, or they need to be pushed back a little bit, or big launches that we had planned for the Israeli market that are now being pushed back a little bit. It just requires of a sensitiveness and a bit of adjustments to your original plan.
Mm. Of course, those have big consequences, though, because I wrote a story just this morning about some of the things you mentioned about the product launches and milestone delays
Yeah.
that are being pushed back, and I think it's like a third of companies or something are experiencing what you just mentioned, which is adjusting their calendars or their pipelines, and that can have long term. And we're kind of stepping off the conversation now, but that can have long term problems if you know funding, as you said, investors slow down or products get delayed, and there's a kind of slowdown in it all. Um, One thing we haven't spoken about properly, which is strange because it's a podcast in 2026, so it's really weird, it hasn't come up yet, is artificial intelligence and
Mhm.
AI and the role that all of that is playing. We kind of touched on it a bit in the kind of fake news context
Yeah.
and some of the misinformation. But in terms of your role in PR and speaking to journalists who are facing their own reckoning with AI and companies that are undergoing digital transformation, what role do you see all of that playing, whether it's your relationship with the press or the press's relationship with the
Sure.
company or the company, like what's AI doing?
So AI is bad news across industry wide, and here's why. I think it has. I mean, you don't need me to tell you, but it has the potential to change life for the best. The problem is that the misuse that is being used sometimes to try and replace things that are not yet ready to be replaced or may not be able to be replaced at all. And I'm speaking about journalism and writers and content. Um, Even now, where AI is a lot sharper than it was 3 years ago when we just kind of like started playing with it, it is still incapable of writing a story like a journalist. And I think you know that, and I know that. And I think a lot of our friends in media know that. But somehow, the media houses or the person sitting with the money or new publications trying to like just create something that is 100% generated or something like that think it may replace the news because they can get it indexed the right way and they can do this and that, and that's going to miss the mark dramatically because as long as people would still refer to authentic real people forward media, then they cannot possibly read a story or a feature from an AI. It doesn't matter how good this AI algorithm is. So it has shrunk media houses. It has reduced, I'm scared to say eliminated, but dramatically reduced content position in our industry. Um, and not always for the right reasons. I think there are multiple ways to use it wisely. We use AI, for different stuff internally within the agency, but we would never write a press release with AI. We would never send an AI driven pitch to the media. I mean, I'm speaking to a person. I think the person expects me, especially if we have, this long lasting relationship and connection between us, doesn't expect me to send them something that is AI generated, but actually where I think the story is and what I think would make it interesting for them.
Mm.
So where if the industry is heading to that direction, my feeling would be a hard no, because I don't think that's going to be the proper way of use in AI. Whereas on the other side, um, you know, bots, especially with OpenClaw and all of that, are becoming a target audience in a way. I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to be talking to bots and we need them to consume content the right way. So it does need to be some kind of a part of your marketing strategy. I'm actually writing a piece of content that I hope I'll be able to finish and publish soon about like if bots are not a part of your marketing strategy, then you have to rethink what you're doing, because you're not only going to be talking to people soon. And it does have an effect and it needs to be somehow adjusted. but I don't think we would ever be able to completely eliminate or to reduce to a minimum the human effect. Whereas in software engineering, it's not the case. I mean, already here today, you can have software engineers orchestrating, an army of bots and Claude and whatever to do the work for them. So you can dramatically maybe reduce the workforce there, but not when it comes to storytelling, not when it comes to media, not when it comes to people really wanting to get their news. I think that's my bottom line.
Mm. And those who are interested in what you've just said can catch more of my other episodes where we talk to other guests about creating teams of bots to do the software engineering. I literally had a conversation with someone just about that very topic, which is very interesting. But you're right, because for me, I've been having a reckoning with what AI means to me. And I think it's kind of like a word that people get quite frightened by, or a term that people get quite frightened by, because in some ways we've been using AI in all of our things for a long time. I've certainly been using AI in the form of Grammarly, right? Like for like 10 years, 15 years, I've been using a tool that shows me a squiggly line if I make a spelling mistake. And that's one form of AI helping me be a bit better writer. But then at what point does it go into content generation itself? And I think for me, that's if you'll pardon the pun, that's my red line. And I think there's a huge benefit for having AI in the kind of editing space and maybe the research space. But I think you're right. Like when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to communication, like person to person communication, like I get pictures that are so clearly AI generated because someone is just paying some service to churn out multiple pictures, and you can just see the cadence is the same, the structure is the same. I find it super depressing, and it stops me from building relationships with those on the other side of the meet. So much of what you said rings true because it's all about communication building and the relationship building. How have you found that to change, if at all, in this new era, whether it's through the AI era or this kind of sensitive wartime period that we're in? How have your relationships changed?
The relationship, I think, changed in a way that, well, in our industry, not a lot of people are staying at the same place for a very long time. So we are very much used to like having our contacts, starting here and ending there. And actually sometimes like they grow with time and with veterancy. So in a way, like if you keep like a good relationship with someone throughout the years, it might actually become more beneficial, if they end up in a really a high place. So that's something that we're used to and we've been dealing with for a very long time. What happens is that people who used to be on the media journalist sides are exiting the world. And that way, it affects the ecosystem in the sense of there aren't really people coming in to take over, or someone is now managing a couple of, areas of coverage in that publication instead of them. Like the teams are not just changing, they're shrinking. So it does have its effect.
Where are those people going?
A lot of them are going in-house to VCs, companies, research companies. Some of them are starting their own kind of like media channel, but it takes time for those things to kind of like build up. I see a lot of them are trying to open agencies, content agencies, things like that. But the idea is that at the end of the day, we do need to somehow, keep the momentum going and to continue pushing for stuff without them. So this actually opened a new channel for us that we're working and like further doing our research and keep on growing in the sense of like influencers and KOL, but not in the sense of those we see in Instagram, with this coupon code and all of that, but like real people from within the industry that are, in any case, have built a thought leadership for themselves, in any case, have a massive followership, in any case, are trustworthy in what they do for whatever, what our client is interested in their, and reaching out to them for them to kind of like, be in communication with us, getting to know the company, trying out a model if it's relevant or something like that. So kind of like expanding what we know about communication and how we deal with communication to more and more areas so we can create more value for our clients.
Hmm. I think what you've just said encompasses so many of the things that we've spoken about communication building and trust in media and rise in AI and the consequences of that technology on this specific ecosystem. I've been screaming from the rooftops that the kind of future of media would be in these ground level independent people, I hope, like myself, that have nothing but their reputation to stand on, so that the work is going to be the best and most honest and thoughtful and fair it can be, because there's no institution behind
Yeah.
that can be somewhat of a safety net, and then at a cost to those institutions, right? I mean, we've seen that's why there's such a distrust in institutions, because people, I feel, hide behind them, whereas this new media landscape that's emerging from all of this is a super interesting time. How does that change your work and your outreach plans then? Talk to me a bit about like the PR media funnel. What's that looking like now?
Yeah, so a lot of more founder-led stuff, just because of the things that you said. I mean, the enterprise, the company, the brand. I mean, honestly, it's been our strategy for years and years. Like we're always talking in two parallel universes, the company and the founders, and we want to create a PR plan for both. It was always the case. I think what changed is that the ratio, because we used to like look at this at like more of 80-20, 70-30, and because founders did not have the time to properly invest in thought leadership articles and quotes and speaking submission and all of that, so we did what we could. The idea is for PR not to become a burden, but to become an advantage. So you do what you can in order to get them through, but with time and with the trust or the interest, let's say, levels of people in brands and not in people, this has to shift dramatically, and it has to be a lot more focused on the people and who they are, and what they do and their voice. And now, we're now having a communication in audio. Who thought 5, 6, 7 years ago that this would become, the most prominent channel? And videos are now in with the reels and all of that. All of a sudden you see video everywhere. So like, there's even more and more opportunity to create more face time for those founders with the media. And these are all new channels. And these are all channels that we work with and we explore and we expand. And I think in a way, it's kind of like, I wouldn't even say it compensates over lost traditional written media. I think it's just evolving. And this is where we're going. And if it was evolved from printed press to digital, and I'm sure there were some casualties along the way, it's kind of like the same a road that we're taking just right now, only expedited with AIs and pandemics and trust and wars and everything that we've discussed.
Yeah. Well, I think it's twofold, because I think it's like the need for the company to have a thought leader, whether it's one of the founders or the CEO, whoever it may be, sitting in front of the camera and being, as you mentioned, in those reels on that content. It adds the human element to a continuously AI-driven world. And so I think that's important for the narrative. I think it's important for the authenticity. And I think it's all of those things. I can understand why the consumer or scroller may be interested in that, but are there any reservations from the founders themselves that have turned to you and said, like, oh my God, whatever you tell me, please don't make me go and speak on a podcast for 45 minutes? Or
Absolutely.
like, please don't get me in front of camera. Like how are the founders responding to this change in landscape?
I think there are like have like divided to three: those who are like star born and they'll take the stage and charisma is flying and all of that, just give them the opportunity. There are those who aren't but want to, and they have like specific prep for preparing for camera and for audio and lots of like dry runs and all of that, and with actual like very very close supervision, we can make them become what they want. And those who are like not interested are not going to do it no matter what, and we respect that and we accept that. And then you have
Them as the people, or them as the company? So
people. People. At the
right,
end of the day, a company is driven by the people and the founders and
right.
the
Could a founder be like, I'm never gonna be caught dead doing that, but I'll send someone else
for
to do
sure.
it?
Yeah, and that is
Do they see the value in it, even if it's not
absolutely.
themselves?
Absolutely. They would see the value. They know it's not them. One solution would be to, give it to someone else in the company that can. Another solution would be to just not do it and focus on written media. I mean, understanding, what it means, and if they're okay with it, fine. I don't know how familiar you are, with the whole Web3 crypto shenanigan, but there was like a very, very long period of time between 2021 and 2023-ish that companies were anonymous. Like they came up with DAOs. There was no people behind the brands, no nothing. And all of a sudden you have to pitch like a story that no one stands behind, and it's not going to work. So you find the channels that would accept it. But bottom line, like tier one media never did. So it kind of like you work with what you got.
Interesting. I didn't know much about that era you highlighted. That sounds interesting. That kind of overlaps with the NFT era, which I thought was a pretty bizarre kind of trend that everyone was going through for a couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, being in our industry in tech for so long and seeing so many like revolutions, evolutions, changes, geopolitical effects, it just like sometimes like we look back and we're like, wow, we can't believe we went through all of that.
What surprised you most in all that?
So much. I think what like surprise for the bad, I would say, is what I told you when we started working on this like initiative around October 7th, like understanding the hate, because you grow in Israel, you come from a Jewish company that immigrated from Europe, you're not loved, but you don't feel it on your skin. Like for me, traveling in the world up until some point, like it was never an issue for me. I always like, yeah, this is a thing of the past. There are some extremists somewhere out there feeling this and that. It's not a part of my world. It's not a part of my living. And then it happens and you just like see all these like waves of hate that for me was like, wow, public opinion is like really, really, bad and was really not managed. And it hurts. It hurts to see that this country as a country was not like looking at Hezbollah, was not looking at public relations properly for so long, that it's like an untouched territory that just like went wild, kind of like an AI hallucination in that sense. And what surprised me for the better part, because we don't want to just always speak about the negative, is how shorter the waves of revolution and changes have become. Like we used to look at cycles of like a couple of years, then a couple of months. Now it's like a matter of days. And for us, because we've been in crypto since 2017, we're very much used to like fast pace. I mean, in crypto, like we used to say that like 1 year in crypto is like 20 years in Web 2. But in AI, like 1 year in AI is like 7 years in crypto. So like everything is just like changing so quickly that I think it's very exciting. And I think it just doesn't allow you to stay stagnant and just like, do your thing and do your work, because then you're just going to become pretty irrelevant very quickly.
Okay. Wow. There's a whole other direction we can go into with crypto and the world that's happening there. But we are running out of time, I'm afraid. But I'm happy that we're ending it on such a positive and optimistic and kind of exciting kind of final word when we look ahead into all the ways that the media is changing. And, as a final thought, I would just say that, there's a lot of nastiness that can come from this kind of democratization of media and the independence behind it, and kind of the technology that can be used for as good things and as bad things, equally good and bad. But I'm bullishly optimistic that we're going to come out of all of this better than ever. Alona, I do have a quick fire round for you before we go. I want to ask you a few questions and then you can just shoot them out. Very little thinking, just sudden response.
Yes.
What is the most overrated PR tactic?
Launching a product.
What is the most underrated PR tactic?
Founder-led PR and founder-led marketing.
What's one founder mistake in one sentence?
Thinking you know best.
Speak out or stay silent?
Speak out.
What's the platform that shapes narratives most today?
X.
What's the hardest call you've ever made in crisis communication?
When we learned a client was not telling us the truth.
Wow.
And we learned that from a media backlash. That was a shit show.
A story for another episode.
Yes.
Final question, Alona, what is the best way for people to follow you, get in touch with you, all of the things that you folks are up to at ReBlonde, and all of the ways that people can follow and keep in touch?
Basically, just run my name on Google. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. My number is everywhere. I'm on Telegram, WeChat. I'm here in Givatayim in our beautiful Migdal HaShachar. Come knock on our door. Let's have coffee.
Wonderful. I'll put as many links as I can, possibly as many as I can find. I'll put them underneath, under you, so people will be able to follow and keep in touch. Alona, it's been a super interesting conversation. I've loved hearing your insights and the kind of back and forth that we've had in this really exciting time in Israel and in tech and in media and PR and journalism. Thank you so much for your insights today.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.